Welcome back, everybody, to the show. What a crazy, crazy world and country we're in right now, where friend of the show, Don Lemon, has been arrested by Trump's DOJ. Pam Bondi tweeting out that she personally requested the arrest of Don Lemon. For what? Was there some crazy story we didn't hear about where Don Lemon walked up and slapped a grandma? No. He walked in as a journalist to a church because protesters walked into the church and were peaceful, and he filmed them, and then he interviewed the pastor about the protest that had ventured into the church. And this is January 6th rioters who got pardoned, step aside. This is terrorism in the Trump administration. You remember we covered this. We knew it was going to get bad when all these right-wing accounts were treating this like it was 9/11. Like, you think I'm being crass? One of the posts was never forget, with a photo of churchgoers sitting and being annoyed with the noise. That was it. So let me remind you, then I'll show you all the specifics, everything we know at this point in time. And you're probably thinking, how is this arrest even approved? As of when I'm recording this, I don't know a lot of the specifics of that. I think they went to a grand jury, but that was after 2 or 3 different courts rejected charges against Don Lemon and said, what? You're going to arrest him for doing journalism? And then apparently this might have to do with the FACE Act, which, okay, sorry, I'm spoiling so much already. But just to give you a sense of how insane this is, look at this. Lemon is being charged under the FACE Act, which has historically been used to prosecute those who impede access to abortion clinics. But it also criminalizes interference at houses of worship. Days into the second Trump term, he pardoned 24 anti-abortion activists who had been convicted under the FACE Act. More specifics on that to give you a sense, those stories were even worse than this. As I just reported, they were charged with blocking entrances to abortion clinics, injuring staff, and live streaming some of it. Trump freed them from federal prisons, 3 rearrested since. Now the DOJ is using the same law to go after a journalist. So it's just insane. And let me ask you this question. Then I'll remind you of the video that prompted this. Then we'll look at a bunch of different reporting and reactions. Just picture if a protest had, and you're probably thinking, did they smash through the windows? No, they walked in. So yes, there's laws in the books about interfering with one's ability to worship, and we want law and order. And you're even more removed from even the event itself when he was there as a journalist filming it and interviewing people about it. Not even doing the protesting, even if you had a big problem with that or you thought it violated the law. But imagine Nick Shirley, benevolent Nick Shirley, walking in to this church and going, there's a left-wing protest. Look, I'm filming it. Pastor, what do you think about this? How the DOJ would react. Do you think they would have gone after Nick Shirley? Or do you think this is because of it being Don Lemon, former CNN host, current independent journalist? And then, of course, the reason the protest went into this church was not because they had a problem with people worshiping, but because one of the members of the church, like one of the pastors, was believed to be a member of ICE. So anyways, here's the video.
The Lord safe in your house, to pray for you all to get your house in order.
That is correct.
The director of ICE.
You're interviewing.
Justice Lord!
Renee Good! Renee Good! Renee Good!
Renee Good! Renee Good!
So somewhere in here, Don Lemon is filming and reporting on it. And they arrested him for that. Jake Tapper says DOJ's original complaint against Don was rejected by Magistrate Judge Douglas Miko, who refused to sign the criminal complaint, and then the DOJ appealed, and that too was rejected. The Chief Judge Schlitz is a former Scalia clerk and George W. Bush appointee, so a conservative. So you have this already being rejected multiple times. That'll be mentioned here in even Fox News reporting as they try to figure out what's going on.
Alert, journalist Don Lemon has been arrested in connection with an anti-ICE protest at a church in St. Paul, Minnesota. Bill Melugin joins us now with more on this breaking news. Hey, Bill.
Yeah, Charlie, good morning to you. Our colleague David Spunton and I getting this breaking news from multiple law enforcement sources just minutes ago, confirming that former CNN anchor Don Lemon has been arrested by federal agents in Los Angeles just after midnight this morning at a hotel. This obviously all in connection.
Walked into a church and filmed. And supposedly, from what we know now, the law he'd be prosecuted under, Trump pardoned people for violating in a more real fashion.
With that storming of a church in St. Paul, Minnesota by that group of anti-ICE agitators. Now remember, the feds had gone to judges to try to get Don Lemon arrested before. They went to a magistrate judge in Minnesota who didn't sign off on an arrest warrant for him. Then it went to a judge above him. He didn't sign off on an arrest warrant for him. Then it went to an appeals court. They also decided not to sign off for an arrest warrant for him. So there was experts who were predicting that perhaps the feds would go to a grand jury. It remains to be seen if that's what happened here, but we can confirm that Don Lemon was arrested in Los Angeles by federal agents just after.
So did you hear that? They tried to get the arrest warrant approved by this court, then this court, then this court, rejected, and then found some other way, presumably a grand jury, a friendly grand jury, to make it happen. And the White House is clowning about this. While I show you that, please do click the subscribe button if you appreciate the show and the updates. As you can see, it's a more important time now than ever to support independent media. And I do think Don Lemon will be able to defeat these charges, and I hope that he does, and we'll support in whatever way we can. You see, they posted a graphic saying Don Lemon arrested, and they call it involvement in the St. Paul church riots. That's not even true. Okay, maybe some random law about walking into churches and preventing people from, but it's like, that makes it sound like they went, we hate Christians and we want to go prevent that. We're going to go to church and make sure Christians can't worship, which is what the anti-abortion folks will do, which gets them in legal trouble, which is like, we're going to impede people's access. Or maybe there were wrongful prosecutions there, but that's what the law's there for, is to make sure you're not preventing people from exercising a right that they have and entering a particular building or worshiping, right? But then this was them walking and going, we don't like this pastor because he works for ICE. We're making loud noises. And Don Lemon's like, hey, I'm here filming a notable event. Again, flip it. Picture it's Nick Shirley who goes, I knew left-wingers were going to be here, so I went and filmed them. This church worship. Never forget, this is terrorism. He would not be arrested for that. This is insanely against journalism, against the free press, and they're making a joke of it, saying when life gives you lemons with handcuffs. Is that what or chains? With chains. A chain emoji. Sickening stuff. And then Pam Bondi's like, hey, in case you thought this was a rogue prosecutor, this was me, bitches. At my direction, she writes, earlier this morning, federal agents arrested Don Lemon and others in connection with the coordinated attack on City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota. More details soon. And then she posted this video, which if it didn't come from her official account, I would have thought it was AI. Look at the generation of this video.
Make no
I am Pam Bondi.
mistake. Under President Trump's leadership and this administration, you have the right to worship freely and safely. And if I haven't been clear already, if you violate that sacred right, we are coming after you.
Okay. What about doing the journalism? What about that? Judge Slitz says Lemon and his producer were not protesters at all. Instead, they were a journalist and his producer. There's no evidence that those two engaged in any criminal behavior or conspired to do so. So it's not just me saying that. You have judges. Judge Schlitz. Dude, what the Schlitz? Even Judge Schlitz thinks that we're right on this. Gosh. Then you have Lemon's lawyer saying Don Lemon was taken into custody of federal agents last night in Los Angeles. Don has been a journalist for 30 years. Constitutionally protected work in Minneapolis was no different than what he's always done. Yeah, this is obviously... They said the government was politicized against Trump. You have these thick, evidentially backed indictments. One of them may be a little weaker, but three, like, wowza indictments. And MAGA's like, just because of who Trump is, they shouldn't be allowed to prosecute him. And then now... This is like the most flimsy, flaccid attempt at targeting someone they don't like, and MAGA's all for it. Kind of crazy. Don Lemon predicted this after a judge rejected the charges one of the initial times. He was like, they're going to keep trying until they figure out how to arrest me.
What is the latest?
You tell me. With this administration, you don't know. Look, I'm not naive. I think they're probably going to try again and again, as they did with Tish James and Comey and everyone. If one doesn't work, then they try something else, and that fails, and they try something else, and then they just don't give up because they want to save face. But I don't know what's next.
So he predicted they're going to try again. Of course, his former place of employment was CNN. Here's them reporting on it.
Brian, it cannot be overstated. This is a stunning move by the Department of Justice, going after a journalist, arresting Don Lemon. What do you see has happened here? Because a magistrate judge just last week told them, no, you are not going to lump him in with those who were protesting. He was there as a journalist. What could have changed, A, and B, how do you see this by the administration, what they have just done?
Right. This is a First Amendment test with multiple dimensions. The First Amendment protects the work of journalists. It also protects the right of worshipers to go to church and be able to peacefully assemble and worship and practice their faith. And the argument that we have heard from Trump officials is that that right to worship was infringed not just by the protesters who walked into that church and started chanting, but also by Don Lemon because he and his crew members were there. Lemon has said all along that he was there not as an activist, but as a journalist. In fact, he was saying those words and repeating that out loud when he was inside the church. But he clearly knew something was taking place that day with the protesters. He told his...
Who cares? Oh my gosh, who cares? Was he a part? Every time I hear the reporting about this or someone talking about it, especially if they're right wing, I keep going, are we still talking about the church thing? Like, okay. FACE Act. By the way, some of the people cheering this on have been advocating for that to be revoked, that to be abolished as a law. But now they love it. But did he have foreknowledge that they were going to open an open door and walk in there and speak loudly? As I said before, what if they were just going to the church for the service and then they got a little bit rowdy, which happens at churches sometimes? I mean, we have mega churches now that have people in harnesses flying around, strapped to the ceiling, banging on drums during rock concerts. You never know. Maybe they were just passionately getting into the worship saying, I don't think that the Bible supports the way that we're treating. Actually, I know for certain the Bible contradicts the way that we're treating immigrants and people being killed in the streets. And the fact that someone at this church, instead of representing Christ's views, is actually working for that organization, we have a problem with. And we're here for the service and we're voicing our problem with it. It wasn't some conspiracy to prevent Christians from worshiping. It did in that case. And so then, of course, technical blah, blah, blah. But even if you're thinking about the protesters themselves, Don Lemon wasn't one of them. And I know if it was a Fox News reporter just following the protesters in to get video of it, they would never prosecute. And this is obviously more than just Don Lemon. He, in that clip that I showed you, named Comey and Tish James, etc. And the political weaponization of law enforcement and the DOJ that they acted like was going on during the Biden administration is really going on now. So that's one example. Then you have this insanity. On Wednesday, FBI agents searched the main election office in Fulton County, Georgia, seeking records related to the 2020 race. Maybe now they'll get to the bottom of it. You know how many audits and investigations were already done? Okay. A U.S. official familiar with the warrant said it authorized agents to look for physical ballots, voter rolls from the year, ballot images created by scanning ballots, and tabulator tapes from every voting machine in the county. Maybe now they'll figure it out. Look at this ominous photo. For some reason, Tulsi Gabbard was there. Look at that. You look like a movie villain. Why are you there, too? The director of national intelligence during an FBI raid. This was Georgia Senator John Ossoff responding.
Ossoff. So a judge signed a warrant for this search, which according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, included all physical ballots from the 2020 general election in Fulton County, all tabulator tapes from every voting machine, all ballot images during the original count, and all of the voter rolls. That's what we know according to reporting at this point. Why do you think, we all have our theories, but why do you think DOJ is doing this right now? Trump's DOJ is doing this right now.
Jen, thank you for having me. And this is a seismic event. This should have people across the country absolutely shook. This is a huge deal. This is an FBI raid on the Fulton County Elections Office. His conspiracy theories about the 2020 election have been based in Georgia from the very start. Georgia is where he called the Secretary of State and said, find me the votes that he needed to win in a state he had lost. So much of the big lie that led to the January 6th sacking of the United States Capitol, that had a mob seeking the Speaker of the House and the...
Okay, January 6th. Have you heard of people walking into a church? You ever heard of that? Because that's the real crime, John. Oh my gosh.
Sacking of the United States Capitol, that had a mob seeking the Speaker of the House and the Vice President to lynch them, originated in his lies about the state of Georgia. And here he has the FBI, which there are so many hardworking, diligent public servants in FBI field offices all across the country, but its headquarters now in the thrall of these political appointees, Kash Patel and Bongino, and this guy from Missouri in the deputy role.
Bongino. Did he do that on purpose? That's great. Bongino.
Who are partisan political actors raiding this election office in Georgia, seizing all of this information, all of these records, taking it who knows where, chain of custody now broken. And here's the thing. This is a shot across the bow at the midterm elections.
And he continues, and that's a great point, too. So we're just in this... One of the points I've heard people make who are a little bit more center-left, like kind of felt like Trump was bad and they voted for Kamala, but they thought some of the advocacy for Kamala was a little bit hyperbolic and that, like, oh, yeah, Trump's bad, but he's not as bad as you're saying. A lot of those people I've heard admit this is the most hyperbolized prediction manifested. This is the person you thought was a little bit too Trump derangement syndrome was exactly correct. I mean, it's the dystopia that the most freaked out people warned of. That's what we're living in. I'll keep you updated, of course.